In 2003, Elizabeth Holmes founded and became the CEO of a brand new and very promising biotech company known as Theranos. Though Theranos' valuation skyrocketed, and Holmes would, at one time, be named the youngest and wealthiest self-made female billionaire in America, she and her company would soon come crashing down, leaving a trail of lies, betrayals, and health problems behind her. Hey guys, so quick note here. I had this script for Theranos written up for quite a while. I've been sitting on it for a little bit, and recently an article came out from the BBC stating that Elizabeth Holmes is actually going to be going to prison here at the end of April. So I figured now was a good time to get this video going. So if you haven't heard of Theranos or you don't know who Elizabeth Holmes is, then please keep listening because this is crazy. This is perhaps the worst scam that has ever happened on American soil. And I'm not saying that because of the money involved and the investors involved and things like that, which, yes, all of that was a huge deal too, but also individual people actually suffered from this health-wise, and you'll see why. So if that kind of thing interests you, please keep listening. Elizabeth Holmes was born February 3rd, 1984, making her an Aquarius and, by the Chinese zodiac, a rat. Perhaps Elizabeth was always destined to make such colossal, fraudulent mistakes, given that her father was the vice president of Enron, an energy company that later went bankrupt after an accounting fraud scandal. Plus, Holmes's great-great-great-grandfather was the creator of the, I'm gonna butcher this name, Fleischmann's Yeast Company, which meant that Holmes grew up in the shadow of her descendants' successes. It's said that she and her family, quote, yearned for the days of yore when the family was one of the richest in America, unquote. Elizabeth appeared to channel the hunger for success from a young age. Excelling in computer programming, Mandarin Chinese, and chemical engineering, Holmes began attending Stanford University partway through high school, while she began working at a laboratory at the Genome Institute of Singapore. Though she was very intelligent and highly motivated, Holmes knew nothing about medicine. Even so, she dropped out of college in 2004 and used her tuition money as seed funding for a consumer healthcare technology company. Thus began Holmes's life of lies. In 2003, Holmes founded the company Real Time Cures in order to, quote, democratize healthcare. Driven by her passions and her fear of needles, she sought out a way to perform blood tests using only small amounts of blood, like from the prick of a finger. And she wanted to be able to do this affordably, while also making the machines small enough to be portable. This had been absolutely impossible prior to 2003, and medical experts told Holmes as much. Still, her passion for creating such technology eventually won over her medicine professor at Stanford. And soon, Holmes was introducing her company, newly named Theranos, to venture capitalists. By December of 2004, Holmes had raised $6 million to fund her firm, and by the end of 2010, Theranos had more than $92 million in venture capital. Over the next 3 years, Holmes was recognized for forming, quote, the most illustrious board in U.S. corporate history, unquote. Elizabeth appeared in public multiple times to talk about the stunning new technology she was promising. During these public appearances, she wore black turtlenecks and used a strangely low baritone voice, which differed considerably from her much higher, naturally feminine voice. It's believed that Holmes's admiration of Apple Inc.'s Steve Jobs had turned into her emulating the billionaire's voice, clothing, and mannerisms. Her obsession didn't stop there, however. Holmes referred to herself as, quote, the next Steve Jobs, and imitated him in every business practice she could. For instance, when she found out Jobs had marketing meetings on Wednesdays, she did the same, and even used the same marketing firms. In September of 2013, Theranos partnered with Walgreens and Safeway to launch in-store blood sample collection centers, receiving $105 million in loans from Walgreens to develop their technology to be placed in what would soon be called wellness centers. These would be additions to the store that featured the technology, where patients could get blood test results back in minutes. What Theranos promised was a revolutionary portable blood analyzer that could run hundreds of tests just from a finger prick. The Edison, later renamed the Mini Lab, was the size of a home PC, and according to Holmes, could perform the same tests within minutes that current blood labs took days and giant mechanisms to perform. She was interviewed by Medscape, an organization that provides access to medical information for clinicians, which praised her for, quote, this phenomenal rebooting of laboratory medicine, unquote. Media attention increased in 2014 when Holmes appeared on the covers of Fortune and Forbes, the latter of which ranked her as 110 on the Forbes 400 list. By the end of 2014, Holmes's name appeared on 18 U.S. patents and 66 foreign patents. And in 2015, Holmes established agreements with Cleveland Clinic, Capital Blue Cross, and AmeriHealth Caritas to use the Theranos technology. She was even allowed to test her currently unsuccessful technology on cancer patients through partnering with Pfizer, a technology she knew had not yet succeeded, and patients that were oblivious to what she was doing. It was astounding. It was mind-boggling. Theranos was shaking the world of medicine. Never before had technology like this existed, and for good reason. Depending on the types of blood tests being done, a phlebotomist may take one vial or several from a patient during a blood draw. This is because each vial contains different chemicals to test different aspects of your blood, and they all contain anticoagulants so that the blood doesn't clot. Unlike a DNA test, which can use a couple of drops of DNA and cause it to replicate, blood does not replicate, and therefore phlebotomists usually take enough blood to test and test again in case there are odd results. Doctors base 70% of their decisions on lab results. If the results are false, it could be fatal. Theranos, however, insisted that their own technology was improving the process and making it not only 1,000 times faster and easier for the patient, but Holmes also claimed that just a drop of blood from a finger prick test was enough for Theranos experts to see a wide range of health information. The patient would prick their finger and smear the blood on a small cartridge. The cartridge would be inserted into one of the portable Edison machines, which would run the tests. The machines would perform the tests on the spot and would send the information wirelessly to a lab where personnel would interpret the results and send a report to the patient's doctor. From calcium levels to cancerous masses, Theranos could supply all of the information you needed. Or could it? At one point, a sales staff member found out that the financial projections of Theranos that year were based off of pilot tests that Elizabeth had lied about. The issue was brought to the board, who ran an emergency meeting and decided to fire Elizabeth. But after speaking with them for 2 hours, she convinced them to reverse their decision, to give her 99% of the voting power, and then fired those who had called her out. After that, Richard Forbes, a medical doctor who knew Holmes and saw right through the scam that was Theranos, issued a subpoena to her head of chemistry, Ian Gibbons. Ian panicked about this court appearance in 2 days, knowing he couldn't hide Holmes's lies, and fearing that he would never find a job after being fired from Theranos. He took his own life by overdosing on medication. His wife found him the next morning. Holmes never returned his wife's phone calls and never held a service for Ian. The trial ended in a settlement, and Theranos continued delaying its product launches. In the meantime, however, the company began taking blood samples from customers, ensuring Walgreens and Safeway that if they just sent the samples to Theranos, they could get results back while they all waited for the portable testing machines to be ready. What Theranos did instead was perform the blood tests on giant third-party machines that already existed in other labs. And then Walgreens and Safeway began to hurt financially. They had poured millions of dollars into Theranos and store renovations waiting for the product to be launched, but they were only met with continued delays. Though hundreds of people had become backers of Theranos over the years, there were still some skeptics. John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal was one of them. He initiated a secret months-long investigation of Theranos after receiving a tip from Richard Forbes. John spoke to countless whistleblowers and obtained company documents from ex-employees. When Theranos got wind of the investigation, Holmes threatened to sue anyone who spoke to the Wall Street Journal and even hired private investigators to stalk anyone she suspected of being a whistleblower. Holmes continued her White House appearances, her public speaking, and her demonstrations for VIP guests. But since her mini-labs couldn't handle the tests, she pricked the fingers of her VIPs and sent the blood to be analyzed by third-party machines at actual labs after they had left. Then Vice President Joe Biden was even invited to Theranos and shown a fake lab setup that Holmes boasted was real. But John Carreyrou was still at work. Finally, on October 15th of 2015, his article was published to the Wall Street Journal. It was a bombshell report, revealing the fraudulent financial records, the eyewitness testimonies about the false test results, and the pile of lies that Holmes had built her empire on. Holmes didn't back away from the questioning. She faced the press head-on and outright lied to the media, believing that this time would be the same as all the others, and she would be able to talk herself back into the public's good graces. "This is what happens when you try to change things," Holmes told Mad Money. "First they think you're crazy, then they fight you. Then you change the world." But in Holmes's case, world changing was never going to happen. The FDA performed an inspection on Theranos and found that their machines could only perform 12 of the over 200 tests it claimed to provide, and even those produced inaccurate results. A criminal investigation began, and the SEC probed into Theranos. Investors sued Theranos, which had voided almost 1 million lab results, and even some patients got in on the legal action. On June 14, 2018, a grand jury returned an indictment charging Elizabeth Holmes and her partner Sonny with crimes in connection with their respective involvement to promote Theranos. Elizabeth A. Holmes was sentenced on Friday, November 18, 2022, to 135 months, or 11 years and 3 months, in a federal prison for defrauding investors in Theranos, Inc. of hundreds of millions of dollars. How could Holmes and Theranos have gotten away with their ruse for so long? It's believed several factors were at play. Number one, Holmes and her partner Sonny were great at hiding their financial woes and lying about the efficacy of their technology, and firing anyone who began to catch on. Number two, Theranos was plugged in not just financially, but politically. Elizabeth Holmes had met with President Clinton a number of times and held a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton for her 2016 campaign. No surprise there. President Obama even made Elizabeth the U.S. ambassador for entrepreneurship. Number 3, and perhaps the biggest factor of all, was Elizabeth's notorious manipulation. With a tongue like silver, she found it easy to convince those around her to have faith in her, even when they knew they shouldn't. That was the end of my original script for this video, but I just wanted to read a little bit of this article from the BBC to kind of update you guys on what is currently going on with Elizabeth Holmes, because ever since she was sentenced, she has been able to live free. So according to the BBC, Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes will report to prison at the end of the month after losing a bid to remain free while she appeals against her convictions. Holmes was sentenced to over 11 years in prison for defrauding investors in her blood testing startup. A federal judge on Monday said Holmes failed to prove her appeals process would lead to a reversal of her case. Obviously. And she is scheduled to go to prison on the 27th of April. Holmes had said she would raise substantial questions that could warrant a new trial, and her attorneys also argued that she should remain free to care for her 2 young children, including one who was born this year. But in the Monday ruling, U.S. District Judge Edward de Villa said Holmes had not proven her appeal would result in a new trial. You are at fault, Elizabeth. Prosecutors, meanwhile, had argued Holmes was a flight risk because she had booked a one-way plane ticket to Mexico during her trial. So, yeah, obviously this woman is still operating under the assumption that if she can just talk to people, she will get herself out of anything. She's going to try to use her silver tongue and get out of the consequences of her actions, which, by the way, she still has never apologized for what she did. Nor has she ever done anything for her lead chemist, who unalived himself. So anyway, those are the updates to the case. She's going to prison at the end of April. I really don't think she's going to be able to appeal her way out of this one, but we shall see. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. To be updated when I post next, click subscribe and ding the notification bell, because if you don't, YouTube will definitely hide my videos from you, and you don't want that, obviously. If you have suggestions for future videos on cryptids, conspiracies, true crime, any of that stuff, let me know, and I will see about adding them to a future script. Thank you for watching, everyone, and come back soon, cryptids.